This is the honorable mention for the 2020 San Diego Library Short Story Contest. Brilliant Blaze by Maddie Cowie. Tyler is 10 years old, her feet buried in the gold-flecked sand of Coronado's Central Beach. Sunset is a torch between the distant islands, turning them opaque, pollen yellow. She can barely make out her mom, an arms-up silhouette bobbing past the break, her laughter a shifting, shapeless sound in the downwind. Tyler is uneasy. She thinks about what her mom said moments ago before striding into the water. It's all gonna go someday. A warning in her voice, but hope, too. Like she's talking about the sun, knowing night's coming, and so is the dawn. When it does, you swear you won't be scared. Promise? Tyler squints up at her mom, whose eyes are narrowed against the last brilliant blaze of sunset, a hand up to deflect the light. Okay. Tyler doesn't know what her mom's talking about, just that it's getting cold and the marine layer is pawing at the horizon like an impatient animal. Promise. That's my brave girl. Tyler's mom touches her forehead. One more dip? Tyler doesn't get why her mom seems to be asking permission, but she nods anyway and watches her walk back into the surf. She vanishes beneath the waves and they close, a paper-thin veil of gold leaf over her head. She doesn't come up for so long that Tyler, skittish, follows her. Before long, the break knocks her down and her lungs fill with salt. Hands beneath her arms and the vault of butter-yellow sky overhead. Her mom laughs as Tyler splutters. Too brave sometimes. She carries Tyler back to the safety of sand, though it shifts dangerously beneath her feet. Come on, it's getting late. The end of the world came so steadily, Tyler couldn't help but be reminded of that saying about frogs being boiled alive. How did it go? She snaps her lighter and holds the little flame to the end of a cigarette. She releases smoke through her nose. It's cold up on the bridge, and since the barges and rigs stopped moving, the bay has begun to stink. Sea brine tangles with mold, the taste of stagnancy, still pools, and poison. Tyler eyes the city skyline. She's from North County, but her mom's favorite place was Coronado. Kitschy, touristy, just the right amount of tacky and true. She'd take them every weekend. They'd visit the same shops and beaches each time, pretending to be tourists. So easy to blend in when no one belongs anyway. Tyler stands at the bridge, trying not to remember. She's unnerved by the silence here, though it's been weeks since a car roared down the lane or a ferry whispered over the water. What are you thinking about so deeply? Ryan makes his way to her side and unfolds a cigarette from his pack, lighting it off the end of hers. Shipment's not due for another 2 hours. You can wait inside. Tyler taps ash on the rail and eyes a plume of smoke rising from the Star of India. You know that saying about frogs in boiling water? Come on, it's getting cold. She casts her cigarette butt off the bridge and follows him. A ramshackle fort has been built against the lane divider. It's plywood and stripped cars, mostly, with some insulation and slipshod tubing to run feeble electricity. Seasiety is spray-painted above the door. When the virus accelerated, factions started forming across the world. At the time, they were little more than Facebook groups, ranging from concerned neighborhoods to political radicals to conspiracy theorists and doomsday preppers. In the end, it didn't matter who was banding together or why. Names and titles fell off the face of the planet when populations plummeted, when the power died and the internet went cold. All that mattered in the end was how to live after you survived. Ryan pushes open the squeaky plywood door and steps into a platform. When Tyler's next to him, he gives a wire line a sharp tug, and their platform rises quickly. The fort is balanced between two streetlights, its core a radio tower built by one of the cleverer members of Society. At the top is a precarious communication cabin. You think it's legit? Tyler eyes the sea through gaps in the plywood tower as the lift ascends. The vaccine? Ryan shrugs. Like her, he's a native. They went to the same community college and might have had a class or two together before the world fell apart. He's older than her and lost both his parents and all 4 grandparents in the first sweep of the virus. He'd been working in the airport and was a carrier before he knew it. He once told Tyler he was sure he'd passed it on to hundreds, maybe thousands of people before he realized. When she reminded him it wasn't his fault, he'd said, "Yeah," with a bitter smile. "Hard to feel innocent when I'm alive and they're not." Innocent. It made sense that the carriers, who for some reason could spread the virus without being harmed by it, felt guilty just by existing. Now they were needed. Society's mission was to amass supplies to protect the vulnerable, and in the year and 8 months since the virus first spread, they'd saved thousands of lives. But in Mexico, a faster-working vaccine had recently hit the black market, and Society needed it, no matter how dangerous it was to procure. Pirates and bandits hid in the coves and along old highways, awaiting to attack and plunder. From what Tyler gathered, these anarchist groups were only interested in the booming, desperate economy of the apocalypse. They didn't care about the cost of their prosperity. So tonight, at sunset, a Mexican speedboat would deliver a chest of this new vaccine in exchange for safe passage through the waterways. Tyler wasn't sure how Society planned to enforce the security, and she didn't care. What mattered was getting the vaccine to their largest warehouse, the old Coronado Hotel. Its castle-like main spire had been burned to a crater during one of the first panic waves, but much of the grand place remained untouched. Society's vulnerable ranks were protected there 24/7, kids and old people who'd managed to evade the virus so far. Tyler and Ryan, Society's fastest runners, only had to wait for the delivery. "You're sweating." Tyler sobers at Ryan's voice. "I'm fine." He shrugs and strikes up a conversation with Alice, the trade-off dispatcher for the mission. Tyler feels unsteady at the top of the tower, where cracked plexiglass windows were wedged between sheets of plywood and plaster in haphazard shapes. The warped material gives an eerie vantage of the land and adjacent sea. Tyler can see waves of dead city stretching over the hills towards the east. Once the lights there had glittered, spangled, and endless as a desert sky. Now they lay desolate as a graveyard. Worse was the sea, stained brown, white froth cast against the coastline. Like so many of the seaside cities, San Diego had been struck hard by battle, plague, famine, and siege. Only in the last 8 months had a semblance of quiet fallen over it. Tyler knows it's because the dead, at last, outnumber the living, that the war has become invisible. Humans against virus, contagion, starvation, 1,000 enemies, and a diminishing will to face them. Tonight, we'll change that. Tyler touches a fingertip to a spiderweb crack in the plexiglass. Tonight's the start of something new. She can't even remember peace or normalcy. Her life is composited only from this last year and a half, a blur of gunfire, smoke plumes, hazmat suits, and crumbling skyscrapers, mountains of abandoned cars, body barges burning in the shadow of five-star hotels. But no, wait, there is something else. A glimmer of something forgotten, almost unfamiliar from before. Sunlight shimmering between islands, sand between Tyler's toes, her mother's laugh on a breeze, and the tide, clear as glass, rushing up to wipe Coronado Beach clean. Tyler blinks. Beyond her fingertip, a dot of motion comes into focus. What time are we expecting the delivery? Not for more than an hour. Ryan's voice betrays the slightest barb of panic. He comes to Tyler's side. That's them. Tyler stiffens. The tiny speedboat leaves a white lace of wake. Not far behind is a pursuing vessel, bigger and gaining fast. Drop the lift! We can't, says Alice, pinning Tyler with a look of admonishment. They can't board at speed. They have to be stopped. If we don't drop it, they're going to be killed, says Tyler, grabbing a Kevlar vest from the safe beneath the dispatch board. Do it. The cables are too thin. They'll snap. Do it, Ryan agrees. He pulls on his own vest. And call Max back up. Tyler looks sharply to Ryan. He says nothing, just bends over the safe and withdraws a rifle. Runners don't do guns, Tyler says, but Ryan puts a rifle in her hand. Ryan, come on. He's already stepping back into the lift. Just carry it. You don't have to use it. Tyler hesitates, then follows. The platform hisses down, fast and unbalanced enough she has to crouch to keep her footing. She glares at Ryan. He doesn't notice. Your mom's there, right? At the hotel? Tyler says nothing. She slings the rifle over her back. The clamorous schling of the boat lift deploying startles them both. Alice dropped the cables. Let's hope they hold. Ryan sounds wary. They hit the bridge as gunfire rings out. Tyler freezes. Ryan is already out the door. Too brave sometimes. Tyler flinches, shaking that old voice, that forbidden memory from her head. A concussive crash follows the gunfire. The boat made it up. Tyler forces herself out of the fort, staggering back at the sight of the lift. One of the thick cables has snapped, dumping the speedboat directly onto the bridge. Bullets ping off the barricade from below. Take it! Shouts one of the deliverers. He's clutching his thigh, blood pulsing in angry bursts between his fingers. They know about the hotel. They'll make it before you. They're infected, says a woman as she steps off the shattered hull of the speedboat. She carries a first aid kit to her compatriot. Carriers not vaccinated. They infect sanctuaries so they can loot them. If you want to protect your faction, you should go. We'll be fine. Ryan grips Tyler's arm. Can you drive? He has a narrow black kit in one hand, enough medicine to save every life at the hotel. Tyler forces herself towards a tarp beside the fort. She yanks it back, revealing hers and Ryan's sleek black bikes. They grab helmets and leap on. As she turns her bike around, Tyler spots the attacking boat in the shadow of the bridge, but its wake is already fading. They're headed straight for the hotel. Go! She's never ridden so fast in her life. Wind bites at her exposed neck, her hands. Time seems to drag as her bike speeds, its tinny wail proclaiming every mile she leaves recklessly in her exhaust. There's a reason Tyler's posted here. She knows the streets of Coronado better than anyone in society. She knows them by Italian food on the water as the ferries pass, sunset on the little dock waiting for the city lights, a stretch of grass by the fountain, eating ice cream and listening to her mother laugh. It's all gonna go one day. Tyler hates the memory. She never relives it. She can't. Swear you won't be scared. Because how had her mother known? What could she have done? The day the virus hit U.S. soil, her mother had clucked her tongue. And so it begins. Tyler forces her bike faster, chest tightening as the bitter wind takes away her breath. She can see the red-tiled rooftop of the hotel in the distance. Once manicured neighborhoods fall away. Broken windows, shuttered doors, smoking cars, scorched fences. Promise? Tyler hasn't talked to her mom once since reading her name on the hotel registry. Was she a carrier? Was she not vaccinated?